Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today we're going to be focusing on the internal rather than the external, and we're going to get into conversations about PTSD, major life changes, and get into a lot of things that we can't control, external factors, but then we're going to focus on the internal, what we can change, what we can affect. And today, to do that with us, to host this conversation with me, it's Mr. Cole Grace, a combat veteran. And Mr. Grace, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, my name's Cole Grace. I'm 41 years old. Was born in Houston, Texas, but I grew up in Michigan. I was in the military, used to do bomb disposal. Did that in Iraq for a year, and I've experienced PTSD from that and from some childhood things that weren't major, but they were minor traumas that still impact. And then after that, I medically retired from the military because I still have episodes of chronic stomach pain and different things that from working with radiation. And then after that, I went back to school in the vocational rehabilitation program, got my associate's degree and got a bachelor's degree in computer information systems. And I went back and worked for the government and was an IT project manager for 7 years. And then I retired from that because I was still having the stomach issues. And I ended up moving to Costa Rica in 2022. And that's where I live right now.
Yeah, so let's go back to the big question everyone always has, which is, so why did you join the military in the first place? What kind of led you into that journey?
I don't have the coolest story about this. It's actually, so I joined before 9/11, like 2 months before 9/11.
Oh,
And the
wow.
reason why I joined was because I wanted to go to a university that my parents were willing to send me to community college, but if I wanted to go to this university with my friends, I was going to have to figure something out. So I ended up joining the Army National Guard so that I could go to school with my friends. And during that first semester, like right in the beginning, September, um, we had the 9/11 attacks, and then I went to boot camp after that in 2002 and ended up in Iraq in 2005.
Yeah, as respectfully as I can say this, joined at the worst possible time. You know, you went in thinking it's going to be easy, just like civilian life with some extra steps, going to go to university, and then everything changed. And yeah, I know obviously we saw a huge spike in people joining post 9/11 to help defend America. And so you said you did bomb disposal. Did you ever come across any ones that went off? Were you out there getting rid of like IEDs planned by the enemy, or how did that work?
Yeah, we actually had a pretty dangerous job. It was before EOD and before they used the robots. So we had our tactics where we had a vehicle that used metal detection and ground penetrating radar to try to find the enemy IEDs. And it had radio jamming equipment. Most of the triggers are set by an electronic signal, like a walkie-talkie. So it jams the signal so that they can't set it, or they're less likely to be able to set it off. Then that vehicle marks it. The second vehicle pulls up. It's a Buffalo. It has a big hydraulic arm on it, like something that would lift pallets, and somebody
Okay.
operates it from inside, like a little video game controller. And it's like the claw where you're trying to grab a toy out of the
Right.
thing. So he goes and digs in that area where where it was marked by the previous vehicle, and he'll detach the IED, the rounds from the trigger, and then they'll search for secondaries. And then I would walk up to that and I would collect the trigger for evidence and I would build a bomb on their bomb. So I take C4 and wire it to a time fuse, and then I would blow up their munitions in place, go back and make sure everything was blown up, and then we'd go on to the next one. Sometimes the signal jammers didn't work and they would go off on the vehicles that were doing the searching or the digging. And there was times that I had to get out of the vehicle and go up to approach a bomb, and then I would take sniper fire or something would happen like that. And I would still have to eventually make my way, like either standing behind a tank and it providing cover for me while I do my thing. But yeah, and then after you get shot at, there's still other bombs that you have to get back out for and be like,
Right.
so it's pretty intense. And the other job that we used to do was convoy security. And in that job, we would escort like supply trucks and we would take them from base to base. And I was in a machine gun turret. And so we would ride like a kilometer out in front of the main body of the convoy to set off any ambushes and visually inspect the road for IEDs so that we could halt the supply trucks and take care of whatever was needed to be taken care of before they had to be involved. And so those were the jobs that we did over there.
Yeah, so directly exposed to combat. And as you were telling these stories, I was thinking, that I would be worried if it was a trap, if the enemy, left a bomb to be disarmed on purpose to, like you said, ambush, or my worst fear would be, what if they set this up to explode at a certain time? Like they took a gamble. They said, we're gonna set, an hour and a half timer on this. And so that's definitely, were you living with constant fear and anxiety? Like this is gonna be your last time? Was every bomb you kind of like, you felt like it was your last one?
Yeah, there's a weird like dichotomy that happens. So in the beginning, it's very scary. And you're worried about a lot of different things like secondaries. So they could have one that looks very obvious and then have another one that's hidden next to it, and you find the
Yeah.
obvious one. And so, but what I learned to do was repress. And this is something that I talk about, repressing your emotions. And I repress fear, I repress everything. And you get in this state where it's kind of like you've accepted the fact that you might die. And that the only thing that I can do is do the best that I can do. I know what I'm doing. I've developed this like perfectionism inner critic that is really pushing me to do things perfectly when people first died. Because when I was in school, when I was younger, I didn't apply myself as much because of childhood trauma and stuff. So my stepdad would tell me that I like do the bare minimum to get by, and you know, slough off a lot. So when people first died, I equated making a mistake with people dying. So I became really mean to myself, but that allowed me to be really good at what I did. And then I
Right.
learned how to repress the emotions and repress the fear. And I thought that I had like gamed the system. I was like, man, this is amazing that I figured out how to do this. But the problem is that I never went back and revisited those repressed
Right, right.
emotions. And so they started bubbling up and coming out after the fact.
Mhm. Yeah, and one thing too, having that mindset though is important because what I would be worried with is complacency, with some soldiers being like they get into a routine, a habit, like, hey, it's just another Tuesday, getting rid of bombs. And you gotta treat everyone like, because that's what we put forward in nuclear operations and reactor, complacency kills. You know,
Hmm.
like sure, most days nothing bad will ever happen, and you're doing the same thing you do every day. But at any given moment, everything could go completely wrong. And a lot of times when it does, it's because of complacency, because you got lazy and tried taking some shortcuts. So I think it's important to have that mindset of people will die, and like you said,
Hmm.
it's a heavy burden to put on yourself, and that you're carrying, but you need that level of pressure to perform well. And so you did that for quite a while. You talked about repressing the emotions, and then later on, you said you also did work with radiation or radioactive materials. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the things like we were just talking about with the repression and stuff like that, y- the thing that I developed was key and crucial for my survival in that environment. But when you change environments, it's no longer serves you.
Mm.
So like when I come back home and I'm in the civilian world, that level of like intensity is actually detrimental now. And now it's not serving me and it's
Amen.
not keeping me alive. So that was something I had to learn how to come back from. As far as the radiation, we worked with a machine that was called the neutralizing IEDs with radio frequency, the NERF system. It was a test system that they were using, and the idea was to shoot microwaves at the sides of the road to try to make the blasting caps, the metallic blasting caps inside of the IEDs have a reaction. And the IEDs were supposed to explode without anybody having to get out, or at the very least, fry the circuitry in their triggers. But they didn't have a weapon system on top of this vehicle, and it was massive, and it would overheat, and it couldn't go on the routes that actually were dangerous. So at the time, it was the last 90 days of my tour. I was like, this mission is cake. But what they had me doing was running like when we did the convoy security, and I was like 1,000 meters out in front of the vehicle. They said the safe range on the radio frequency was 500 meters. I need 300 meters standoff if a bomb goes off, so we just kept it at 1,000. But I didn't have a rangefinder and I didn't have like a Geiger counter. So I'm out in front of this thing that's shooting radiation at the ground, and I'm escorting it, around while we're doing these test missions. And they have to turn this thing off when they go through friendly observation posts
Right.
because as not to radiate friendlies. But I'm riding out in front of it the whole time. So when I came back, I had like my gallbladder was removed because it was had a bunch of scar tissue as if I had gallstones my entire life, but I've never had gallstones, and like have just continued to have these episodes of unexplained stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, and
Right.
it's somewhat there's some psychosomatic, some mental aspect. Like if I'm really stressed out, I'm more susceptible to having these episodes. But even when I'm not stressed at all, I've still had these episodes.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those ironic military moments where it's like, all right, we got to turn this stuff off because we're going through this, quote, the friendlies. But it's like, what about me all day?
Yeah.
I'm out here all day. You're fine. You're a
Mhm.
soldier, So
Right.
I've seen a lot of, military stuff like that as well, especially when it comes to radiation work. And so, yeah, tell us. I want to go back to when you got out of the military and how that whole transition out went for you.
That was difficult because, like I said, I had developed into this really, really machine-like good at what I do. And I'm the front guy. And I'm the guy who does a lot of this, the dangerous, some of the crazy stuff. And so in my mind, being medically discharged because of these stomach issues, at first they thought it was just ulcers and that it would heal and with time that it would be okay. So I continued, but then I was continued to have these episodes and I was medically discharged, and I had a lot of survivor guilt as my friends started to go back on second tours, third
Mm.
tours. I felt like a piece of shit. I felt like I didn't feel like a very good soldier. And so a lot, and then they were also telling me like it's in your head, it's mental, that it's like 100% mental. So then I'm thinking that I'm like weak and that the only reason that I can't go back is because I can't get over this mental challenge in my head. They also told me it was somewhat lifestyle, like drinking or doing smoking marijuana. So I stopped doing all that, but still having the issues. And so there was a lot of mental battle of blaming myself for not being able
Yeah.
to, or for being sick, and then for not being able to be in the military anymore. And then I was a pizza cook, and then like a physical labor, like I used to load shingles on roofs. Some of my jobs weren't. You go from being responsible for people's lives to getting yelled at for putting too much cheese on a pizza, and you
Right.
want to choke somebody out. So
Yeah, for sure. No, I get that. And what you're saying, what I'm hearing is the trying everything they can to say it's not job related and to keep you in, obviously. And to follow that up, one of the things we've talked about before on the show is like there are some jobs in the military that there's just no civilian equivalent. You get out and it's like that's it. Your resume says, yeah, you were military, you got military training, but what are you going to do bomb disposal wise in the civilian world, right? There's only so many, opportunities for that. And most of them are government or military connected or associated. So it's like we've talked about people getting out and they think that now they're just going to be this amazing civilian who gets hired by any job they want because their resume says military. And then they find out like, hey, civilian world doesn't really care too much. It's like, yeah, they can say, oh, this guy's a veteran. Maybe he has a good work ethic or this or that. But if none of the skills translate over, the only thing they're going to say is, okay, hopefully he can be trained at a job well. And you hope that they take that chance. But otherwise, like, right, I assume that's why you kind of went into the pizza creation industry was the fact that there just weren't bomb disposal opportunities, or what kind of led you into getting a job different, or were you seeking kind of like a more peaceful environment for the time being?
No, you hit the nail on the head. It's a combat job. And if I want to do what I'm doing without the stress, like, yeah, I could maybe go be on a bomb disposal for like the SWAT team, but that's still that high stress, high pressure job. The only thing I could do with the explosives was maybe go out west and do like controlled net landslides or like pyros technics
Yeah,
for Hollywood. So, but that would
right.
require like relocating and all this stuff. And so I was trying to figure out what am I going to do? And one of the things I found is if you have a certain level of disability, I think it's 60% or more, there's a program called vocational rehabilitation. It might have changed names now. Um, but look up that, voc rehab. There's also your GI Bill and your GI Bill kicker. And you have a lot of transitional skills. So being military, I didn't have a lot of directly applicable skills to the job force, but my leadership, staying calm under pressure, being able to handle tasks and stay on task and work
Yeah.
ethic and all of that can transition into being retrained. I had a lot of bitterness because, like I said, like I felt like I was responsible for, you know, uh, some life or death. I'm responsible for, and people didn't question. I had respect. And now I'm in the classroom and I have this teacher who's being really anal about something stupid that doesn't make, it's not life or death, and I don't really care that much. So I have to reset my mindset to it doesn't matter necessarily what you feel about this. You're doing this to get the degree. So in order to get the degree, you
Mm.
have to do the tasks that are laid out in front of you, regardless of if they're stupid or whatever, jump through the hoops, get the grade, and you'll be able to retrain yourself in these fields and you'll learn things, but some of the things that the professors want you to do are just tedious and they're basically just making sure you can follow directions and
Yeah.
stick with the task. But they can be annoying when you just came out of a combat zone and you're like, this is
No,
what you're
I
worried
get
about.
that. I get that. Yeah, I started going to college after the service for a little bit there, and yeah, I just felt like this is stupid, especially these foundational required courses that aren't related to my subject matter at all, and just stuff in the civilian world in general. I think what happens is, people don't realize like how privileged America is. There's a lot of ungrateful generations that just say that we're not free, that we are, this dictatorship, that X, Y, Z. And then, I think when you go out and you have that life or death, career, that life or death situation, you really realize like there are bigger picture things than like I'll give an example. There's a protest going on. I won't name the company, but a very famous coffee franchise, probably the biggest one in the world, is implementing a new uniform policy where they had to wear black pants and a black shirt and then the green apron. And people were rebelling, talking about it's oppression of rights. It's not letting us express ourselves. It's an attack on identity and equality and this and that. And all I could think was, how ridiculous that is, to make a tip over wearing a uniform at your job, you know. And so they're just like people in America, especially, just find some of the, every time I go on social media, I just see petty stuff, like you said, insignificant quarrels. And then you've got men and women out there fighting, risking their lives just for us to be able to do that. I think, especially when like you went out there and you know what it takes to keep this country free, you have such a greater appreciation for it. But I want to shift into talk about. kind of getting into the civilian world, it's not the best time. And then at the same time, still carrying around all those repressed emotions, not, processing them, and then maybe starting to deal with PTSD as well. How did that all coincide together?
There was I got this identity in being a combat veteran and
Mm.
being the job that I did. It gains instant respect. Even, Marines who usually don't respect anybody, they'll be like, "Oh, what? You were bomb disposal? Dang, okay." And like, so there's this instant level of leading with that. Like, that's who I am. And I didn't, that was an external thing. So, like, some of the internal things, I didn't know who I was. I had like low self-esteem outside of like combat zone stuff.
Right.
I was dealing with reactiveness and hypervigilance from having, you get this chemical cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline that's constantly going, and you're constantly on guard, looking at like the minorest changes in detail of like that dirt looks darker than it did yesterday. So
Wow.
somebody might have dug there. So let's check, like weird things that are on a level that you wouldn't you just
Right.
can't comprehend, and then you get back here and there's so much more stimulus that it's really hard to process, and you get overwhelmed in crowds and it's like, whoa,
Right.
this is weird. And so then I started to isolate. I started to have this, well, I don't want to expose people to me and my problems, so I will just, uh, deal with them on my own, because I'm also having the stomach issues. I don't know what's going on, and I'm trying to like go out and celebrate being home and party, and like it's this big cocktail of uh, just not good. It was bad for my mental health, and I didn't realize why. I thought I made it through Iraq. I didn't get blown up or shot somehow, and so I'm good. Now all I have to do is just have fun and enjoy my life. But it wasn't true. I had to go back through those moments that I repressed. So it was a long road to figuring out that all the things that I repressed were what was bubbling up, and that I was going to have to go back and do some work.
Yeah, and if I could word it one way, would you say you almost felt like what they call a one-trick pony, where you were a combat veteran and that was it, kind of. That was like your one thing.
Yeah, that was it. That was like the major thing that I had done, because I wasn't good in school and I wasn't, that was, yeah, I would say that was definitely where my identity was. I was more like that one trick pony, like this is me. And so I know that people like that part of me. So that's all I got.
Yeah, I know. Like I never try to lead with I'm a veteran because I don't want that to be my identity. Like being a military guy isn't who I am. It's a part of my life,
Right.
right? But I would say it's a chapter in a book. It's not the book title. It's not the front cover. It's just a chapter in it. And so I want to get into, you talk about the internal, the external, and kind of beginning to realize that. So, what did you do to recover, kind of work through all of this as you started realizing about the internal feelings you were having?
It was somewhat easier for me to accept that I had PTSD from from my tour in Iraq. So I started to do some combat or some counseling. And the first time I seen a counselor, he wanted to talk about my childhood, and I cussed him out because I was like, I just got back from disarming, from working on bombs in Iraq, and you want to, talk about my
Mm.
childhood.
Right, right.
And so I was very guarded on that. I didn't think that had much to do with it. So I did a lot of work on the combat stuff. I wrote poetry. I like really introspected and went over, worked on my road rage, because when people would cut me off, I'd feel like I was unsafe or like I had to eliminate the threat. And so worked through a lot of that stuff. And then I got my job with the government and started becoming successful. And so now I'm checking boxes on all of the external things. I went back to school. I got my degree. Now I got a six-figure job. I bought a house. I am able to go on vacations when I want to. Um, but I'm still having the stomach problems, and I'm still having intrusive thoughts. I'm having to distract myself a lot when I have them. Just go do something, and it's very easy to do in the United States. And I actually became addicted to opiates during this time because I would go to the hospital. They would usually treat me with pain medicine when it would happen, like once or twice a month, and I'd get over the episode and be fine. I didn't have a prescription for any of that. But during 2013, that was the opioid crisis, and you'd go to the emergency room and they wouldn't treat me anymore, and they'd send me home in pain still. I started to seek that on my own on the streets, and then I started to take it when I didn't need it. And this is when I was in school and I was working. So I'm like justifying it because I have a high paying job. I'm turning it on, I'm getting all A's on my assignments. I'm not messing up. I'm still high performing. And so it's numbing not just my physical pain, it's numbing my mental pain. And I don't understand why I still have mental pain because I think I worked through all my trauma. Well, I went to rehab for 9 days to try to get off that. And I was given a book called Unlearn Your Pain and Depression by Dr. Howard Schubner. And that had a lot to do with the mind body connection and a lot to do with your core beliefs that are formed from like 0 to 5 and how your upbringing was. And the pages were like jumping out of the book at me. And I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't have what I would call a big T trauma in my childhood, but it was a bunch of little T traumas, like a bunch
Right.
of small things. Like my dad was an alcoholic and an addict. My parents divorced when I was 4. We moved around a lot until I was 8. And like, during there was a lot of turmoil. I wasn't like sexually abused, physically abused, or anything like that, but I formed a lot of insecurities, like attachment styles, nice guy, perfectionist, and a lot of these different things that when I started to realize that it didn't matter how much money I made, it didn't matter how my physique, it didn't matter what kind of car I drove. None of that mattered because I was broken inside. I still had all these insecurities and all these blocks in my fears, insecurities, negative mindsets, negative self-talk, um, negative beliefs about myself, negativity in general, like a negative attitude mindset. And those things manifest into your reality and like with the law of attraction and stuff. And so by not paying attention to those, even moving to Costa Rica, man, I moved to Costa Rica thinking that was like the coup de grace where I learned that the external wasn't going to fix the internal. I moved here and we had talked earlier when we first started talking, there's a lot of transitions, like there's inconvenience and there's learning the new language, learning when taxes are due, when your license is renewed, all these things are different. And so I actually start to get depressed. I'm having the stomach episodes and I get depressed in Costa Rica. And then I start beating myself up that like, man, you're living the dream and you still can't be happy. So there's this meanness of it made it feel worse that I had all this external stuff and still wasn't happy. And one thing I talk about is if, Robin Williams or Anthony Bourdain, people who were famous who reached the pinnacle of what would seem like external success, but then committed suicide. And then, I'm realizing that like if I don't work on my internal stuff, those negative mindsets, beliefs, and that stuff I was talking about, I will never enjoy the external, and my external will continue to reflect my thoughts and beliefs. And so there's a lot of power with that.
For sure. And then something we haven't gotten to yet that I'd love to mention and start discussing now is the fact that you just had a book come out just about 2 months ago at this time, internal versus external, or I guess it's internal is greater than external, calming the chaos within. And can you kind of tell us about how everything we just discussed with your journey led to the creation of this book?
So, having that realization that I was chasing, and that a lot of us, that's what we're kind of with the consumerism in the United States, we're trained and we're like brainwashed that if you buy the next thing, you're going to be happy. If you reach this level of whatever your
Yeah.
checklist is, that you're going to be happy. And nobody ever talks about controlling your thoughts and controlling your beliefs and how your beliefs and thoughts manifest into reality. And so I wanted to write the book because I had that epiphany. I was like, man, this needs to be out there. It was a healing exercise for me to write it. And then even releasing it, I had a lot of negative self-talk. Like, who are you to be talking to people about this? You're not a doctor, you're not a psychologist, you know what I mean? Just you wrote the book and it helped you, so you don't need to release it. But I had to use some of the tactics in my book, like gratitude, positive affirmations, a personal mission statement, and repentance and forgiveness to overcome a lot of these fears. They don't go away, but in the book I teach you how to manage them and how to deal with them and overcome them and be aware of them. And so I use a lot of areas where you have negative self-talk. You find yourself um, having like a negative attitude, like, oh, that'll never work, or um, having a trigger where you're overreacting to a certain stimulus. Yeah, that person might have been an idiot and cut you off, but the fact that you want to like chase them down is a problem. So I look in those areas for subconscious reasons why I'm reacting that way or why I'm having, that negative belief. And then I reprogram it with a positive affirmation. And then every morning I do gratitude, like 3 to 5 things that I'm grateful for. And your brain, this is neuroscience. It's not just like some mamby-pamby type thing. So I thought it was at first, but you have this thing called a reticular activating system, and your brain uses it. It filters your reality based on what's in your reticular activating system, and you can prime it. So, for example, if you just bought like a new Chevy Tahoe or something like that, you're going to see a bunch of Chevy Tahoes on the road because your brain and your reticular
Yeah,
activating
yeah.
systems. So that's what I'm doing with the gratitude and the positive affirmations. I'm training my brain to look for those things. If you have a negative belief that you um, are aren't good enough, then your reticular activating system is going to look for examples to reinforce that belief. Like,
Right.
see, right there, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. And so your filter starts to filter negatively. And what I'm trying to do is retrain that filter for positive. And it's really powerful. It doesn't work immediately. It's like going to the gym and doing some crunches and coming back and being like, oh, I don't have abs yet. Like, you're gonna have to work at it for a while.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And we're gonna have your book in the description below for people to check out, either for themselves or send to others. And then with your guesting, with your book, what is the one main message you'd like for everyone to take away?
I want people to understand that um, the things that you can control, they're not easy to work on. It's easier to distract yourself with the external things, and it's harder to look internal and work on the internal. But by doing that, you're going to influence and better enjoy the external. And if you stop chasing everything on the external, um, it's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit. Like, I like the gym analogy. You're going to be sore and it's not going to be fun, and you're not going to necessarily notice the results immediately, but it is very powerful, and you can improve your quality of life. And I just want people to know that you're not alone, that I struggle. People that you might see that look like they have it all together, we all struggle. And it's just how we deal with it. And I try to provide tools that help me deal with it.
Yeah, so I want to thank you for coming on the show today to help share those tools and resources and to share your story. So thank you for doing that, and I appreciate you coming on the show today.
I appreciate you having me, man.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors, my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air, on this voyage we have to share. working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.